We are right now. There's not a ton to tell in terms of what has been happening, although there are some very important dates coming up in the next, I'd say 30 to 40 days. So as the last time we were in court, as many of you know, we were there on Prospect's motion for relief because Prospect wanted to sue Charter Care Community Board for one, claiming that Charter Care Community Board did not have the right to assign to me their 15% interest in the joint venture. And also, I believe that they were seeking to have Charter Care Community Board indemnify them, meaning basically cover their expenses to defend the litigation. I know that they have made demand upon CCCB for that indemnification. And as of right now, they have not yet filed any suit, which is probably more of a function of the fact that the judge has not yet entered the order, which resulted from that hearing in which the judge did grant them the relief. The reason for that is because they presented an order to the court following that hearing, following the judge's decision. He issued a written decision on that. And we felt that their order was far too broad based on what the judge stated, and so we submitted a competing order to the judge, and as of yet, as of today, the court has not entered either order. So until the order gets entered, everything kind of stands in limbo, status quo, so that's why nothing has been done down there. Other than that, there was in the federal matter, the defendants all asked Judge Smith, the judge who's overseeing the federal matter, to allow them to depose me as well as Attorney Rick Land, who is the attorney for the old hospital entities, because, this is my own summary of why they believe that the settlement agreement that I entered into with St. Joe's, Roger Williams, and CCCB was much, much, much too good for the plan, and therefore there must have been some collusion that went on, some type of inside deal. Those depositions did go forward. Rick Land was 2 weeks ago, mine was last week. And there was a status conference with the judge today where all discovery and depositions had been completed. As of today, there's been no motion that's been filed with the court with regard to that issue. During the status conference today, the judge acknowledged that the hearing on the final approval of the Charter Care Foundation settlement, which, if approved, will result in, I believe it's $4.2 million to the estate. That's a gross number of $4.2 million to the estate. Is scheduled for the end of August. I don't have 28th, 30th?
29th.
August 30th.
29th.
Oh, the Superior Court is August.
Wait, hold on. The 29th is the federal court.
August 29th is the federal hearing on the CCF settlement. Final approval. There is a August 30th hearing is the interim report. Mine, that's Superior Court. So the 29th is in federal court.
We had the vote for the 29th, but then it was changed. It was forced off to September.
No, there are two hearings. So there is the CCF settlement approval, final approval on the 29th in federal court. Then on September 10th in the morning, there is the hearing on the St. Joe's, Roger Williams, CCCB settlement at 10 o'clock. And then at 2 o'clock on the 10th, we are going to, the judge is going to entertain all of the motions to dismiss that were filed by all the defendants and our objections and replies. So that's federal as well. So the 10th, September 10th is federal, both of them. And the first hearing is at 10 a.m. That's on the settlement. And then at 2 o'clock, the judge is going to entertain the motions to dismiss that hearing. On the call today, the judge indicated that it was probably going to be about 3 to 4 hours total to address all of those issues between both hearings on the 10th. It might be actually longer. Some of you have heard some of the attorneys, and they have a tendency to like to talk. So that could run on. So I'll go over those dates one more time. August 29th, in federal court, is the hearing on the final approval of the Charter Care Foundation settlement. September 10th at 2 o'clock is the hearing on final approval of the St. Joe's Roger Williams, 10 o'clock. Did I say 2 o'clock? Okay, I apologize. Let me start over. I'm going to start over. I'm going to go August 29th, and that is at 10 o'clock in the morning. That is final approval in federal court of the Charter Care Foundation settlement. Then also in federal court on September 10th at 10 o'clock is the final approval hearing on the Roger Williams St. Joe's Charter Care Community Board settlement. On that same day at 2 o'clock, the court is going to hold hearings on the motions to dismiss filed by each of the defendants. In Superior Court, the only date that's scheduled right now is August 30th, and that is on my 10th interim report. So those are the three hearings coming up. That's at 9:30 in Superior Court. Thank you. So obviously, all the hearings are important. The report is less important, I guess, in the sense that it's more of a presentation to the court. With regard to impact on the plan, I think everybody here gets the sense that the 29th and September 10th are two very big dates, both in federal court in front of Judge Smith, because that's when we hear final approval on two settlements, and then there's a determination as to whether or not this litigation goes forward and against whom. And that's what the motions to dismiss are. So barring what I just said, there really hasn't been much, because we've been waiting for these points with Judge Smith in the federal court. The only other time frame that's important for you all to know is in connection with the settlement with St. Joe's, Roger Williams, and CCCB. You might recall that they proposed to assign to me their 15% interest. That was the subject of Prospect's motion for relief. Originally, in June of this year, there was a deadline for CCCB, under the settlement, it would be me, to exercise an option to either keep that interest or to liquidate it into cash. Because we had been fighting about getting information so that we could evaluate the value of that 15% interest, all the parties agreed that that June deadline could move to September. So as of right now, the deadline for me to either advise Prospect, or CCCB as the case might be, to advise Prospect that we are either not going to liquidate that interest, or we are going to liquidate it and turn it into cash, right now is, I want to say it's September 15th, but don't hold me to that date right now. It is sometime in the middle of September. I can't tell you as I stand here right now what I'm going to do. I can tell you that I have, working with CCCB, we have engaged an independent valuation expert to let us know what they believe the value of that interest is, so that I can assess whether or not it's worthwhile to liquidate it or to hold on to it and see if maybe it appreciates. But as I stand here right now, I have not made a decision on that, and I'm still dealing with the valuation experts because they gave me a valuation based on the information that they had, but recently, and by recently I mean maybe about 4 or 5 business days ago, CCCB sent Prospect another letter saying the valuation experts needed more information so that they could complete that valuation and be maybe more precise. And as of right now, I have not heard whether or not there was a response to that letter. That's where we stand right now. I'm happy, as always, to answer any questions that anybody has regarding anything I just said, or anything else for that matter concerning this case. Delaware is an option. We spoke about, I think you came in maybe about 30 seconds late, or after I had said it. You're not late. I just said it before you came in. It is still an option. Prospect was granted their motion to have relief to go sue, and they did indicate that they thought that Delaware was the appropriate venue for that lawsuit. What I did indicate is that the judge has not yet entered an order on that yet, because there are competing orders. Prospect submitted an order. We thought it was too broad. We submitted a competing order, and neither one has been entered as of today. And until the order gets entered, Prospect will not be able to do what they have stated they want to do. So nothing is happening yet, but that doesn't mean that nothing will continue to not happen. They could do something once that order is entered. John?
Related to Delaware, two questions. Is there any intention to appeal the judge's order when entered? And number two, assuming it goes to Delaware, what's your opinion as to the time frame and the costs involved?
The second one's a doozy of a question, so I'm going to answer the first one first. No intention to appeal at this point. As a matter of fact, we did discuss it very, very briefly, and rather than delay the process, I actually think that my decision on whether or not to exercise the put will have more of an impact on that and less delay than anything else. And what I mean by that is they have sued stating that CCCB didn't have the right to assign that interest to me. However, if I exercise that option to liquidate that interest, then they wouldn't be assigning the interest to me anymore. They'd be assigning money to me, and that would moot that issue down. As far as I'm concerned, that would moot the issue for any potential claim down in Delaware. And that, I think, is probably the more prudent and more cost-effective and time-effective way to go. If I do, in fact, decide to direct CCB to exercise that option. The second question is much more difficult in terms of time frame and cost. There will be a cost. That is, I will have to go down there. The Judge Stern, has already indicated that CCCB holds that interest for my beneficial interest, for the plan's beneficial interest. So I definitely have an interest in what happens in that suit, so I would have to intervene in some way, shape, or form. In addition, Charter Care Community Board would have to defend it, and as everybody knows, as part of the settlement, they pledged money to me, but they're going to be spending some of that money to defend that lawsuit as well. So that puts at least the financial piece of that settlement at some risk, depending on how much it costs. Unfortunately, I don't have familiarity with the Delaware court system enough to be able to say how quickly that court will address an issue like this, which is partially why, depending on what happens with the put, I'm hoping it becomes moot. Quite frankly, although there may be very compelling reasons to not liquidate that interest, the plan needs money, not a 15% stake in a hospital. So unless there is a compelling reason to keep it, then I would lean, as I stand here today, and this is not a decision, but I'd lean towards liquidating it because it's important to get that money into the plan. Yes?
Any other discussions about them having another mediation session?
We have not had any discussions about reconvening mediation. The thought of both myself and Attorney Wistow, and in casual discussions with the Defendant's Counsel, are that those discussions, if they're going to be entertained, will likely be entertained after the motions to dismiss are heard, because that'll frame who is still in and what counts are still there, and that will motivate people a little bit more if they know that they're going to be engaged in litigation for a long time, both on the plaintiff side and the defendant side, to sit down again and see if we can revisit that. The mediator that we used the first time has already indicated a willingness to come back, so that's also good in the sense that we won't have to pay somebody to get up to speed again. He's already up to speed.
How much money is still in the plan?
I knew you were going to ask, somebody was going to ask me that question, and Julie and I were looking at that this morning, and something came up and we got distracted, and as we pulled into the parking lot, I said, did you happen to look at that number before we came here? Julie's going to look right now, and as soon as we have that information in real time, I will give it to you.
What was the question?
How much money is left in the plan as of right now? Subject to Julie's clarification, I'm going to say we're in the high 60s, but we'll get that clarification.
Where do we stand as far as the PBGC is concerned?
That's a very good question. The PBGC has asked for, well, as you know, we filed the election, and the PBGC has asked for information from us, which we have provided in full, and we are awaiting notification from them as to a time frame for a meeting. So the short answer is we don't have any further clarification today as to what the PBGC or the Department of Labor's position is, but it's not because there hasn't been a lack of communication. We have communicated with them, we have provided information. They actually did, and I'm not sure if I told everybody this at the last meeting that we had, just in advance of the mediation. By that I mean maybe the day or 2 days before the mediation. The defendants took a position and made a statement as to what the PBGC's involvement would be, wouldn't be, what my rights would be as a receiver, things of that nature. And we reached out to the PBGC, and quite frankly, not based on any experience, but just based on my understanding of how government moves, I was shocked to, within less than 24 hours, got a response from the PBGC that was consistent with what we believed the course of action would be. And we were able to provide that to the mediator and all the defendants and really remove what I kind of considered to have been a red herring that was would have mucked up any progress in the mediation. Not that we made any tremendous progress, but it would have been something that would have made the issues less clear, and the PBGC sending that letter as quickly as they did was very, very, very helpful, not only because it clarified and confirmed what I believed, but also because we had it in advance of that mediation. So they have been very responsive. They've been receiving everything. They did immediately ask for information. We immediately provided them the information that they've asked for. I will tell you as well, is because now we are covered under ERISA, because I did make that election. The election I made was retroactive to 2017. So what that means is under ERISA, the plan was required to make annual contributions, which the actuary calculated at, and these are round numbers, approximately $10 million per year. So recently I made demand upon Prospect, the diocese, and the old hospitals each to pay me the $20 million, 17 and 18, that ERISA requires to be made under the basis that they are the responsible parties to do that. I know everybody received that letter. I have not yet received a check, but I know everybody received the letter. So that demand is out there and has been made, and that'll become part of the different things that we discuss and fight about as this case proceeds. Better news than I thought. The plan has about 71 million in it as of right now. So I said high 60s. I'd say over, what is it, under promise and over perform. So I told you in the high 60s and we got 71. Every million helps.
So how many years does that get us?
That I don't have that. I can get that answer for the next meeting. I'll have the actuaries run that out based on current market conditions and things like that. I have not asked that question in several months, so I don't want to give any misinformation on that. Although I don't want to mislead you, it's not a long runway under current circumstances.
Last meeting, you said 5 to 6 years.
I was just going to say, when I say not a long runway, it's somewhere in the 5 to 7 range. Maybe market conditions have made that better, although I understand the Dow dropped like 700 points today based on news with China. So, although, you know, we don't look at it on a day-to-day basis. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but still, we're talking, last I checked, we were looking at a runway of somewhere in 5 to 7 years with current cash. Obviously, if we get an infusion of cash through these settlements, then obviously that changes the scenario, and in some instances could change it dramatically.
Does that also mean that the PBGC, if that stepped in, that would just negate this whole idea that it ends like 5 to 7 years?
I heard if PBGC stepped in,
Would it extend the life of our plan at
Well,
that rate?
again, I don't know what will happen with PBGC. Under my understanding of traditional PBGC coverage, which this is in no way traditional PBGC territory, is they have a maximum that they would cover participants for on an annual basis. That number is somewhere in the range of about $67,000 per year. And if they came in, then it would be that percentage or something less, depending on how they calculate it. I know there's how much time you've been paying premiums and things of that nature. If they came in, that would obviously go to extend the plan much, much further, because they would guarantee those benefits, at least up to a certain point.
67,000, is that? per-
67 million.
Okay.
So, oh, I'm sorry, 67,000. Yes, I'm sorry. I was thinking of my high 60s on the plan. It's approximately $67,000 per participant per year. Okay? So if you're receiving $2,000 a month, that means you're making about $24,000 on your pension. That is within that 67. So arguably PBGC would be covering the entire amount of that benefit if you were collecting the total of $75 million a year, $75,000 a year. Then we can change it to millions. Then obviously they would cap their coverage at the 67. So whoever was making 75,000 would get trimmed by about $8,000 per year based on that.